Alrighty, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you happen to be watching this. So glad to see you guys here. Welcome back to Deep Dive. I am Scott. I'm one of the co-owners here at Central Oregon Recording, and every Monday morning at 10 a.m. we go live right here from the studio to dive deeper into different mixing techniques, recording techniques, gear reviews, etc., all that kind of good stuff. So please feel free to join us every Monday morning if you can. If you're watching this at some other time, we appreciate you too. Thank you for tuning in and checking out what we are talking about. Today, we are continuing what we started at the beginning of the year with mixing in the box, and we are working on bussing and effects today. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to be here last week, but the previous week to that, we had gone through kind of gain staging and panning and building a rough mix of the song that we're working on. So today we're going to start working on adding in space and effects, so delays and reverbs, talking about using Auxes, why we use them, why they work compared to, say, slapping a plugin directly on a track, and the kind of fun things that we can do with them. So let's kind of dive in and see where we left off with the entirety of the mix. So let's jump in here to Pro Tools and let's give it a listen. All right, so we get an idea of kind of what we had already built with the mix, what it's sounding like, and what we're doing with the whole thing. So let's talk about using buses and Auxes. So first off, what are they and why should we use them? So they are basically a duplicate of whatever sound or sounds that we want. So for example, if we were to take the guitar and we were to send it out to an aux or to a bus, what this is doing is this is actually duplicating or copying how much of the signal that we're wanting. So we can do that in a few different ways in most DAWs. We typically have post fader or pre-fader. So what this allows us to do is either send the signal before our fader. So whatever level we have set, we can send another version of this before that, or we can send it post fader, so after where we have the level set for that specific track or tracks. So we can use these to our advantage depending on how we want to do it. And with this copy, we can then kind of do whatever we want. So we could add reverb on it, we could put delay on it, we could compress it, we could add any kind of modulation effects of any kind that we're looking for. So lots of different options. And this kind of allows us to basically do like a dry wet kind of idea. So if we have, let's take a snare drum, for example. If we have a snare drum, instead of putting an actual reverb a reverb plugin on the track, we can actually just duplicate it by sending it to a bus, and then we can put the reverb there, and then we can blend it to taste. So we're doing basically like a parallel processing type of thing. So that allows us to tailor or to make or have as much of the dry sound as we want, and then blend in that track. Now, granted, you could throw a reverb directly on the track itself and blend it in with, like, usually they have a mix knob. But if you're doing this for multiple instruments, this starts to eat up a lot of CPU power. So you can actually, again, just send all of those instruments to a single bus and have the reverb or effect or whatever there, and then you're actually using less resources, and it kind of adds like a glue, if you want to call it, where everything is going to a similar reverb. So let's say if we put all the drums into something similar, like a similar reverb of some kind, this kind of creates a space that they all live in together, and we can blend that to get less or more of certain elements. So a lot of fun stuff we can do there. So the next question is, why does this matter? Well, this really comes down to how we record instruments. So we'll go back to the drums, for example. When we record a drum set, we typically are placing microphones directly on top of a source. So think of like a kick drum. Maybe we're putting a microphone inside the kick drum, or just like a few inches outside the kick drum, or a snare drum just on the top, kind of pointed down on the head. We're putting microphones in places that we don't typically listen to that instrument. Like that, you wouldn't actually walk up to a drummer and put your ear down next to his kick drum and then tell him, hey man, nice kick sound. You actually listen to it in a space. You're typically standing back, you're in a room or in a hall, or maybe even outside, but you're away from the drum, and you're hearing the entirety of the drum set by standing away from it in a space. So because we record so much of these instruments with close mics, we need to kind of talk about adding that natural space back in. So that's why we like to use reverbs and maybe even delays or room sounds or whatever it is to kind of create a space that we're used to hearing, or that sounds a little bit more natural. This even falls back on an electric guitar. So if we look at the electric guitar, most of the times, we're running, say, pedals or things into an amp, and maybe the amp has a reverb or tremolo. So even in that aspect, we are hearing the delays and the reverbs coming through the amp, but the amp is in a room and we're listening to it away from the amp. We're not putting our ear up against the Tolex listening to the speaker. But that's where we place microphones. So we need to think about creating something a little more natural. Now, that doesn't mean that everything has to be that way. We don't have to put everything in a room or a reverb or a delay or et cetera. We can actually use it to our advantage to make things sound, basically back and forth in a space by using EQ, and then of course by using, say, reverb or something. So we can create space and kind of even depth and width sometimes. So front to back, side to side, just by how we're using these elements. So let's take a look here first, and let's look at, we'll start with the guitar mics here. So we have two guitar mics, 1 and 2. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my sends, and I'm going to send them out to a new track. So I'm going to say new track. And for now, let's go stereo aux input, and we're just going to call this guitar effects. So you can see that it has now created a bus. So here's my send for the bus. Here's the actual guitar effects bus itself. And you can see that I've got follow main pan on. I'm going to turn that off for now, but we're sending a full amount. So here you could select pre-fade in different DAWs. It's going to look a little bit different depending on what it is, but that's where that is at in Pro Tools. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually center these all up, and I'll put it on both of these. Okay, and I'm going to solo safe this so that way we can listen to it. So I'm going to solo up the guitars. Mute this out for a second. So that's just the guitar. If I add the effect in, all it's going to do is duplicate the signal. So you see it just gets louder because all we're doing is duplicating. And again, I'm sending post fader, so it's sending the exact levels that I have set here on my faders. It is sending that to this effect here, to this little bus, this aux. So So again, see they're at unity there, and so they're just sending this and they're not pre-fade. So let's look at something like a delay first. So let me go ahead and pull up a delay. We'll just pull up repeater from D16. Okay, so right now, if I just pull this up, this is the initial setting. It's a digital delay, and we're on quarter notes, and it's connected to whatever tempo it is, which I don't think we set a tempo on this, so it's going to be off, not that big of a deal. But I want to talk a little bit about different kinds of delays and what they can do. So first, digital delays are typically very clean, clear, crisp, and they continue to repeat the exact sound that's coming out. So in other words, it's just basically taking a copy of it and it's just repeating it at whatever speed you have it set, and wherever your feedback is set, it's going to do that over and over and over and over. Analog delays are typically kind of darker sounding. They actually start to decay the top end, or they actually start to kind of like degrade the sound as they continue to repeat. A great example of that in a pedal version is the Mxr Carbon Copy. So this is a typical pedal that you would see for doing stuff like that, but all kinds of companies make them. You can get all kinds, of course, like a Strymon is known. I think the Timeline, that's kind of a well-known pedal. But the idea is that we have different kinds of delays. Now you've got stereo delays, which of course are going to be left and right. You've got mono, which is one. You also have ping pong delays, so it's going to hit on each side back and forth to kind of give you like that ping pong effect. So there's all kinds of settings and cool things you can do there. So let's listen to what this is doing. So I've got this, it's set for quarter note, it's locked to the host, so we'll see what it does. It's not being spread at all. I'll increase the feedback here some. I'm not doing any high or low pass. Looks like there's no really coloration to it. One is pan left, one is pan right, and the mix is at 100%. So let's see what happens. So there's the delay, right? It's just delaying, and you can hear it's doing the same thing over and over and over. So if I do this, it's just going to repeat forever. But you can see that it's just literally doing the same thing over and over and over. It's actually... Well, okay, on that one it actually is starting to get a little dirty there. But that's kind of what that does. Now let's go look at a different delay. Let's see. Let's look at... Let's just grab like a tape delay, for example. Here, let's let it die away. Do the same thing with a tape delay. So you can actually see that the feedback is actually making it get louder and louder. So that's something really cool about an analog style delay, is that it's going to do that. Now on this one, we can actually turn the analog feedback right here on. So this is what happens when we do that. So you see it gets darker and darker as it continues to progress through. And that degradation is actually really neat and actually makes it sound a very specific way, so we can do some cool things with it. And then of course we have ping pong. So I'll do a ping pong here and see what that sounds like. Oh, let me crank this up. So it's just literally bouncing back and forth between each speaker when it's coming at you. So that's a really neat thing as well. So there's all kinds of cool stuff that you can do with a delay. Now, one of my favorite things to do is kind of make a space with a delay. So I'm going to turn this on sync mode none so we can actually hear the delay here. And what I'm going to do, let's see here, I'll bring this over here for now. I'll put it up here. Okay. So all I'm doing is I'm taking the time down on the delay, and I'm just trying to find it to get it basically make like a slap. So most of us have heard that, like say rockabilly, of course, any kind of surf music, even like chicken picking country, they might have like some kind of slap or something going on. So by taking a delay, and we can take the feedback down so it's not repeating a bunch of times, and then finding that space that we're looking for, we can kind of create. We can actually create a space with that, right? So let's keep going. So it kind of sounds, like the sound is bouncing off a wall and like slapping back. And we've probably heard this in, if you're ever out like at a concert or something, you can kind of get that kind of sound. But the cool thing is now, so I'm going to take the guitars back to where I had them, which is I think around 20, pan 20 to the left. And I'm going to actually turn this, this delay all the way to the other side, to the right. So we'll have the original guitar playing on the left-hand side, and then the other guitars can play on the right. So we get like this kind of crazy cool little slap thing where we're hearing the guitar hit and then we hear it hit on the other side. Now, of course, we can then say take that kind of a sound, and we could even add that into a reverb to kind of give it more of a natural sound. But you can kind of get the idea where we can play with things to make it sound the way we want. So let's do something else. Let's, instead of using a delay, I'll just kind of get rid of that for now. Let's grab a reverb, and I'm just going to grab, let's see here. Looking through, let's just grab, let's grab just a standard spring. This is just a stock plug-in spring reverb, and we'll see what this sounds like. Okay, so spring reverb, but instead of putting it on the opposite side, I'm actually going to pan this so that it is exactly with the guitar, like that. So just by adding this reverb, it's a spring verb, which is typically what you would find in a guitar amp, but making it a little bit more wet and panning it with the guitar almost seems like it's further back. Now we could also use EQ to dull this up and even push that a little bit further back, because when things sound more dull or darker, we tend to perceive them to be further back in a mix. So they're pushed a little bit further back, but we can place the guitar just by using a reverb in a space. So something also very cool to do. So there's all kinds of neat things, and you can mix and match and do all this kind of stuff. So let's look at the drums. So let's get out of the guitar world here, and we'll come into the drums. Start about right here. Okay, so let's listen to our drum sounds. Grab all of our drums, let's solo these up, and let's take a listen. So we did record rooms on this, which are right here. So we do have a room sound that's already happening, but we can kind of take that a little bit further. So let's listen to our kick, our snares, and our racks. So these are kind of like all the close mics on the drum set. So pretty dry, pretty dull sounding, which, we haven't done any EQ, any compression, anything like that yet. We haven't done anything really processing wise. But let's look at putting a reverb on the snare drum. So again, I'm just going to go, we'll just create a new track. I'm just going to call it Snare Verb. Create it. Boom. We're going to solo safe it so we can hear it. And let's go grab a reverb. Let's snag gold plate. All right, so let's go in. Let's see what we've got here. See what's under tight. See what Magic Chamber sounds like. Kind of a cool sound. But so let's see. A little dark for what I'm looking for. So let's keep going. Okay, so we can kind of hear that. So I'm just kind of blending it in, even though we have room mics, I still want to kind of use, say, some kind of verb to add something to this, to kind of add some color or like some depth to the snare drum, which will kind of help open up the snare drum sound. And there's some cool things that we can do with different, like different reverbs and things. We could even look at, using, say, a sample and having a sample drive a reverb. That gets done a lot in, say, like rock and things like that, where we still use, say, the original sound to blend in, but we have a sample driving an effect, a reverb. That way the reverb sounds consistent every time and we don't get some of those extra sounds. So little things we can do like that. But again, we're going to blend this in with the full drum kit to kind of add to what we already have. So let's solo up the rest of the drum kit. I'll take the reverb out on the snare. Back in. So it's just adding a little extra space to what we already had recorded. And again, like this is a really neat kind of trick that we can do to just add a little extra space or a little extra energy, maybe a different kind of energy to what we're doing. So that way we're creating like an ambience, a new space for the listener to be in. And this is where you get to be very creative as an engineer, because maybe you've sat and talked with the producer or with the band or the artist about what they're going for sonically, but now you get to make those decisions and try some cool things out to get an idea of building up this space and building up the energy in a way that you see fit. And then, hopefully that the producer or the artist agrees with you. If not, then of course you can make changes, but you get to kind of be the boss of this kind of stuff. And kind of come up with your, something that I actually really like to have fun with is actually doing a delay. So let's grab a delay here. I'm just going to grab, where are you? The isotope D delay. And let's mess with this a little bit here on the snare drum. So you see, I'm just kind of adding like this extra little like groove and movement to it. So now if we add all the drums back in, it's just a little extra added movement in there. You know, and then with this one, we can also filter sounds out. So I might, you know, go in and say filter out some of the low end, to kind of bring the top end back in a little bit. Maybe I put a reverb on that as well and kind of blend that in just to add a little bit of like movement to the drums, to add like this little bit of energy that's going on. So again, you can be very creative when you're doing stuff like this because you're not affecting the dry sound. All you've done is created a copy of something, and then that copy, that's what you're doing stuff with. So you're actually manipulating and changing the copy. Something that you can also do is even EQ before your effect to add a specific kind of sound. So for example, we'll jump back in and let's just throw a EQ here. We solo up our snare. And what I'm actually going to do, let's make this pre-fade. And the reason I'm doing this so we can mute out our original sound so we can hear just the effect. So take the delay off. That's what we hear with the delay off. So say that's kind of what we want it to sound like going into the delay, and then we get this. Okay, let's say, oh, you know what, like instead that's just a lot of top end, maybe we don't want that. So instead let's do something like this, and we'll do just mid-range. We put that in with the original snare. Again, you can do all kinds of fun stuff with this. Let's even look at, we'll take this away for now. Tell you what, we'll just get rid of that. Let's grab our kicks, our snare, our rack, our worst, and maybe like our rooms. We'll grab all of these guys. And we'll do a new track. And we'll do a drum smash. So what's the point of this? Well, let me do, I should have done this. We'll go through and we'll make these all pre. That way I can mute, we can mute these all up. So again, we're going to just basically listening to the copy. So coming through this drum smash, aux or bus. Okay, and this is pre-fade. So again, where our faders are set doesn't matter because it's sending the full amount, but this is the sound that we're getting. So now, this is where things like parallel processing come into play. For example, let's talk about compressing it. So I'll just grab like the Monster, for example. So we've got that slapped on there. Let's see what this does. So nice and smash sounding. Let's bring all of our drums in, and I'll pull this down. There's our normal drums, and let's add in this drum smash. So we're just adding energy. Again, this is the great thing about doing anything with auxes and buses is that we can kind of do whatever we want. We can EQ things, we can compress things, we can add effects to things, we can do whatever we want, and it's not going to affect the original sound of things. Now, granted, we haven't done any EQ and compression on the actual tracks themselves, so of course that's going to change depending on what we're doing when we're setting out to auxes and doing, say, parallel processing. But the fact of the matter is, by doing things like this, we can add energy, we can add space, we can add depth, we can even create new sections for a song. Let's say we're going from like a verse to a chorus or something along those lines. We then can bring things in and out, we can move things around, we can change different spaces or verbs depending on where we're at in the song, and it gives us tons of flexibility to create something new or something different or something exciting for the listener. You know, this is the great thing about space, because even like, let's say, you know, we're talking about like that with the guitar, we're putting things in a space. We could go and grab something completely different. In fact, let's just take a look at that to see what we can come up with there. So let's jump in here. And, you know, we had that spring reverb here on the guitar. Turn that off. But let's look at something weird. Let's grab this. So this is from Sound Toys. This is their crystallizer. So this is a delay or an echo that has pitch shifting involved. So we're talking about crazy modulation. We'll just go into guitars and keys. Let's see here. Grandtacular. Let's see what Grandtacular sounds like. We're gonna make it 100% wet, and I'm just gonna pan this out 100, 100. So it's still like kind of like a little sound we got going on. Let's see what else we have in here. Muffled up octave. Let's see what that sounds like. Okay. I've never actually gone through some of these, so that is hilarious. That sounds like an organ. Like let's listen to that. That is awesome. Okay, hold on. I got to hear that by itself because that is just too good. So like that, it's an octave up that is, you know, so we're pitching it up, and of course, you know, the delay is very, very short on that. Okay, now like I brought the delay up. Let's listen to it now. You can see like there's so much you can do. Oh my gosh, it's great. But so like, let's look at that, but let's throw that into a reverb now. And let's do something like, let's go crazy. And I'm gonna grab Valhalla Supermassive. So this is a giant reverb, right? And let's go into let's see, a reverb. We'll even do a small, quote, small and wide. So, and then I'm going to bring the mix about 50%. So yeah, let's listen to that. There we go. With the guitar. So again, like maybe not the exact sound I'd be wanting to use on that guitar, but you kind of get the idea where we can create any kind of cool, different, weird spaces and sounds and anything that we're looking for. You even getting into modulation where, granted, like that we're tuning things with that, and slightly delayed, and we're also adding a reverb, but we could even do like modulation effects where we've got, say, chorus or flanger or phaser or anything time-based, also adjusting things. So let's go back, like let's see here. Let's take off Supermassive for a second. Let's change Crystallizer to just a standard delay. We'll just let me grab just a standard delay here. All right. Okay, so we have a delay, but now let's go into our modulation and let's just grab like let's see here. Grab another like guitar pedal-y kind of thing. So this is a chorus. Let's listen to this. So now like that, we're chorusing out a delay to add a little extra weird movement to the delay signal itself, which, I mean, again, this is something that is done and can be done. I mean, it's, again, going back to the carbon copy delay here. If you actually look, there is a mod button right there, and that mod button is modulation. So delays even have this built in for guitar effects and pedals and things like that, where we're kind of designing or changing the sound and the color, the movement of things. I mean, we could even throw like a tremolo on there. There's all kinds of fun stuff that we can do. It's really sky's the limit. So I definitely suggest that you start looking at using these in a very specific way to kind of add some kind of tonality. Now, everything we've done so far has been in stereo, but what about a mono? So mono effect sends can also be very, very cool. So let's go ahead and, again, we'll go new track. We'll say mono guitar. So same idea, I'm just gonna copy this over. Mute that guy out for now. Okay. Again, just a copy. And I'm gonna spread these out. So this is a great trick if you need to or want to add kind of a doubling kind of sound to something. So we're gonna I'm just gonna grab the mod delay here. So this is a modulation delay. Imagine that. So it's a delay that we're going to add modulation to. I'm going to take the time down to, we'll start at like, oops, come on you. 40 milliseconds, real fast, right? Hey, stereo. And then we're gonna add some modulation to that. I'm going to go pre-fade again so we can listen to it by itself. I'll bring the level down. So you can hear, like, I'm definitely going a little crazy on the modulation there, so it's really fast modulation, but that kind of adds this kind of cool, vibey sound. And now, instead of, say, like, if you couldn't get the artist, or maybe you specifically didn't want to play the part again or couldn't quite duplicate something, you can kind of create your own faux duplication or faux double tracking of this sound by just doing this. So now I'll pan this back to 100% and we'll listen to it with the other tracks. Okay, so there's a mono one. Let's add the other stereo one back in. So it adds like this really cool vibe, this really cool sound that's happening. And it's interesting, I don't know if you noticed this, but remember the guitar on the left side, that's the dry side. That's what we're hearing, dry. Whereas the mono guitar effect that I did on the right side, that's the one with the crazy, like, modulated, chorusy thing going on. But it sounds as if it's bouncing almost like a rotary speaker, like a Leslie, where you're getting that kind of that modulation back and forth. It's kind of creating a similar thing because you're hearing the modulation on one side, but that dry sound, you're hearing the modulated sound coming together so that they match, and then they're going apart again. So the sound waves are literally like this. They're the modulation. Here's the regular one. The modulation one's coming into pitch and the same speed and everything of that, and then it disappears again. So it's wavering back and forth, and that gives us like that back and forth kind of crazy sound. So let's hear that in the mix now with everything going on. So like that. So this could be one of those where maybe you only use it for a very specific part. So for example, like that. In the very beginning, it kind of gives us like this double tracked kind of sound. And then right there, when he kicks in and starts playing more of like a solo-y lead thing, then all of a sudden we can take those off and then we get just a normal sound. So let's listen to that if I do that. So I'm just going to basically be muting out the mono guitar. And I'm actually going to pan this in a little bit. We'll go, say, 40% instead. So we've got the dry on 40% to the left, and then that other weird mono delayed thing going on the right 100%, and I'll take it out when he comes in to the next part. So we can actually view it right here. So when he comes in and starts kind of soloing, we'll do something different here. So you kind of get the idea. I'm just taking it in and out as just kind of really quickly there. But you can add different motions in different spaces by, again, taking things in and out, having things only for certain parts and then taking them away, etc. So the last thing I want to look at here is talking about this right here, this very last one, this Submaster. Now, of course, I have all these other effects that we didn't even touch. These are just pre-built. A hall, a plate, a room, an ambience, quarter delay, eighth delay, tape slap. Basically, this is part of the template that I have built. I always have these on there, so I have quick and easy access to any kind of effect that I'm looking for to kind of basically audition things, even audition things for a client. That way, if they're like, I just need some reverb or some delay when I'm recording, or I'm looking for a little bit of this kind of sound, we can actually go through and kind of just, audition things and listen to things right away. So it's always good to just have those up and ready. But the one I'm most interested in is our Submaster. So this is something that I have come to do in Pro Tools specifically. And the reason for this is the fact that the way the plugins work in Pro Tools and on your Auxes, or say your regular audio tracks, compared to a master. Now, remember when we talked about pre and post fader with Auxes, we can set things for pre, so before the faders, or post, after the faders. When it comes to Auxes and masters, they run differently depending on what you're doing. So with plugins on an Auxes, all of your plugins are pre-fader, meaning that they are getting the full amount of the signal, and then that's what they are working on, or what they're actually manipulating sound-wise. Is no matter where your fader is set, those plugins will always receive the same amount of signal, depending on however much you're sending from all of your other tracks, right? Because I'm sending all of my tracks to this one Submaster, so left and right, and then that goes to my master. Now the master is different because your plugins on the master are post fader, meaning if you bring down the volume, if you're writing the volume, say, of your master, it's going to change what is actually happening to that plugin. So for example, I have the Slate Digital. This is the just their standard, their mastering console, etc. So we're doing a little bit of work here. So let's take a look at what's happening. Okay, so you can see we're hitting the compressor just a little bit. You can kind of see everything's kind of moving around. I'm going to bring the master down. I'm actually going to bring the level down as we're listening. And I want you to look at the faders. And, of course, it's going to get quieter, but I want you to watch the actual, the fader here. And then I also want you to look at the VU meter. So you see, as I kept bringing that down, it actually stopped compressing, because again, all of these plugins are post fader, means they're after your fader. So if you're making any kind of volume ride on a master, it will change what is getting sent into the plugins that you have on the master. So typically, I do any kind of my processing on the Submaster because I can move this fader and nothing will change. So for example, pull up the FG Gray here. So you see I have the mix way down. You can see that we're hitting around 3, sometimes even up to maybe 5 dB on this compressor, but no matter where I put the fader, it doesn't matter. Like all the way out, still there. Up, out, still there. Nothing changes. So the fader doesn't change what is being received there. It's all the same. It's all right there. So this is very important to know. Now, not all DAWs are like this. In fact, some DAWs allow you to actually set whether or not you are pre or post on your plugins, or kind of how your master behaves, which is really, really nice. But it is very nice to do that. And the last thing you might notice is that we don't have a send on our master. We do on the Auxes, on the Submaster, but not here. So this also allows me to send out to different things. So let's say, for example, I like everything the way it is, and I wanted to print this. I could literally go in, create a new track, name it print, and now, if you don't do that, sorry, and that was because it's set to itself. There we go. Little feedback loop for you there. So now, again, we're getting a duplicate of it. So again, we're duplicating the whole thing. And that, of course, what that is doing is it allows us to send out to actually print it. So if I made that an actual audio track, that would of course print to what's going on. And of course, the reason that fed back is it was literally the output of one was feeding itself back in, and that's what creates a feedback loop. It's just the way that our routing is set up that it automatically sets it to the Submaster. So apologies about that. But this gives you that ability to print something, again, like to an actual audio track, and say you printed that out, then you could take that and use it as a reference. You could send it out to some place. You could leave everything the way it is. Or let's say you wanted to print through actual hardware. You could send out of your interface, go print through an actual piece of hardware, and have it routed back in on new tracks with your whole tube bus like that. So you're doing a left and right. So lots of different options that you can do there to kind of use busing and use this kind of processing to your advantage. And again, this kind of sky's the limit, really, because you can create tons of copies of all kinds of stuff and have things going to weird random places. This is also how we kind of use, like for routing things, sometimes I'll actually use this to monitor what I'm routing. For example, if I wanted to go out to a physical piece, let's say I wanted to go, we'll go new track and stereo. We'll just call this effect send. So here I have an effect send, but instead of going out to the Submaster, I want to go to a physical output, go say line 1 and 2. And then I wanted to create another new stereo audio track and call it guitar guitar dimension. We'll call it that for now. So I could then, in essence, send whatever I want out to this bus, monitor what I'm sending out my line 1 and 2 from my interface, and then from line 1 and 2 I can patch that into outboard, bring that back in via preamps or anything, and actually record something, an actual piece of outboard gear, by using bus. But I get that monitoring, so I know how hot I'm sending into that actual piece of hardware. I can even like adjust, or I can use that say to do automation to things, to what I'm sending. So again, lots and lots of routing options. So I highly suggest that you start looking and using Auxes or buses to your advantage to start building up and creating space, creating movement, also like that, doing maybe compression effects, because the cool thing, for example, like with parallel compression, you can go a little overboard on the compression to really squash or really crunch things up, but then it's on its own separate track that you can just blend in to taste. It's not a big deal, so you can get a little more creative and a little more crazy with your effects by doing things when you're working with this. So I hope this is definitely helpful. This is something that I feel, especially for beginners, it's something that you don't really think about, is using Auxes or using buses for your effects or for your sends and things like that to do neat tricks. But I highly suggest you start using it, because you can get more creative when you're doing stuff. You can work on actually sending things to new places, or say grouping certain elements together and processing them together. And it also saves you processing power on your computer. Most computers anymore are very, very powerful. It can handle quite a bit. But if you've got a lot of plugins going on and a lot of processing, this can actually save you quite a bit of power, because you're putting your effects on a bus and sending everything to that bus. So you're only using one, say like high-powered reverb plugin, or maybe just a few of them, and sending things to, instead of having it say on the drums, you've got like 6 or 8 instances of this reverb. So it will help, and it also saves a lot of time, because now you're not trying to duplicate settings or put things on multiple tracks. You're just sending everything that you want to whatever bus you've set up. And again, this will also, if you build templates, which we will talk about in the future, this will save you tons of time, because now you can go into Pro Tools or Studio One or Logic or whatever DAW that you have and have things set up and ready to go with reverbs that you know you like, that you've auditioned. You say, I really like the way my drums sound through this, and have things ready to go so you can just get to recording and get to creating instead of having to spend time setting some of this stuff up. So I hope this was helpful. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. We do this every Monday morning at 10 a.m. to go through and start diving into deeper stuff. We're going to continue working in the box for a little bit longer. And then from there, we're going to start branching out into more outboard, maybe gear reviews, also talking about recording techniques as we get into things. And again, if you have any questions, pop them in the comments below. Please make sure to like the video if you got something out of this. And if you are not, please hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell. You will be notified every time we go live Monday mornings at 10 a.m. so you can join us and start learning more about mixing and recording. Hope you guys all have a wonderful rest of the day. I am off to go do some more mixing today, and we will catch you guys next week as we continue this series in Deep Dive on Monday mornings. All right, thanks guys. Enjoy the rest of your day.